Hi, everyone. Today we're going to look a little bit at something called watersheds as we continue learning about water. Should you need to get a hold of me, you'll see my email address on the screen. It's rcrawford@jcpsmail.org. All right, let's go ahead and move right in. So when we're talking about a watershed, I think it's important that we at least understand some basic parts of a river. And these may be familiar to some of you already. Um, we want to start out with the uplands or the sort of the source of a river, and we oftentimes will call this the headwaters of a river. It is often up on the side of a mountain or up on a hill, could be where a spring begins coming out of the ground from groundwater, but usually we call that the headwaters. As we make our way down, we're going to find that this stream gets bigger and bigger, and it's going to join together with other streams. So, and this is a word I believe many of you have seen before. The word I'm talking about is a tributary, and a tributary is just any smaller stream that is joining in with sort of that main channel or the river. Okay, so we can see that we have several tributaries here in this particular picture. The next word that I want us to look at is something called confluence. So a confluence of a river system or a confluence of a river is where one of those tributaries joins the main channel or the river. So here would be the confluence for this stream. Here would be the confluence for this stream. And it's just really where two tributaries or the tributary meets up with the main stream or the river. Okay. And the final bit that I want us to look at is something called the mouth. The mouth of the river is where the river flows into something else. Now, that something else could be a larger river. It could be that it flows into a lake. It could also be that it's flowing directly into the ocean. So it's in some ways where that river would seem to end, but not always. Uh, you notice here that there is a delta that is shown. And so a delta is just a sediment that's built up over years and years. This is when you studied it in social studies, I believe earlier this year. You know, this is where you can have some really rich farmlands wherever you have these deltas at. Okay. All right. So those are the basic parts of a river system: the headwaters, the tributaries. Confluence is a word that means where one stream flows into another, and then the mouth of a river. So when we're studying river systems, one of the things that becomes important is the actual land itself. And so when we look at a river system, we want to look at something called a drainage basin. And so a drainage basin is just the land. Now, basin by itself just means a depression on Earth's surface, like a dip or a low place. And so, Earth's surface is, of course, very uneven, and there are all kinds of depressions on it. And so, of course, we have many, many basins. And so, generally speaking, these basins, these depressions, are going to have some high sides. They could sometimes be hills or ridges, but not always. And wherever we have like this high side, I want you to think of it as being a little bit like a bowl. All the water is going to flow off of these high sides down toward the lowest point. Water flows downhill. That's not a new concept for us. And so if we look at this picture, we can see that here we have like a ridge, here we have another ridge, and over here we have another ridge. So we actually have two depressions here, right? And so that's going to mean that we have two different drainage basins. Here's drainage basin number one, and here is a second drainage basin. So I want you to think about the fact that if we look at this center ridge here, this is called a drainage divide, by the way. If we look at the center ridge, if you're a raindrop and you fall right at the center right here, if you happen to go downhill this way, then you're going to end up inside of this drainage basin. If you, on the other hand, flow this way, you're going to end up in a completely separate drainage basin and into a completely separate set of streams. Okay, so really another key word here is drainage divide, and that's really just a ridge or a high place that's going to separate two drainage basins. Some people would say this is where two drainage basins meet or come together. So drainage basins. So the key that we're trying to get to here is something called a watershed. And watershed and drainage basin really mean just about the same thing. So I want you to keep in mind that when we were talking about a drainage basin, I didn't really talk much about the water other than how the water moved along the land. And it's true, drainage basins are about the land itself. And really, so are watersheds. So a watershed is any area of land that collects water and it drains it into a central body of water, like a river, like a lake. Um, so here we can see as we look at this particular diagram that would show us a watershed, um, I want you to notice that these are some high places. So these are those watershed divides. This is the boundary, if you will, of the watershed. And so all of the water from within here in this area is going to flow down off into this central stream, right? And that's what a watershed is. But keep in mind, a watershed is not the water itself. A watershed is actually the land that the water runs across, or maybe even if it's moving underground, maybe that it's running through. Um, in this particular meaning of shed, I want you to think about the shedding of water, similar to how your dog sheds fur, right? So that just means that it comes off of it. And so the water is coming off the land and it's being drained down into this central um, sort of stream here, or this central location. So a watershed is the land, strangely enough. So we can have watersheds that we can have watersheds of all sizes. So, like for example, I live on Greens Creek, so I could look at the ridges that surround Greens Creek, and I could say, "Oh, this is the Greens Creek watershed." But then, if I kind of zoom out just a little bit more, I might notice that Greens Creek is going to flow into Savannah Creek, and I could say, "Oh, here's the Savannah Creek watershed." Each tributary inside of a watershed is going to form what we call subbasins. And so really, watersheds come in all sizes, and so it's all a matter of scale and what you're choosing to pay attention to. When I ask you to look to find out where the Tuckasegee River was flowing into, some of you may have noticed that it actually flowed into the Little Tennessee River once we got over through here. So we can see that the Little Tennessee River watershed was all this area of land. So if we look at these edges of where this the Little Tennessee River watershed is, these are going to be the high places. So all the water in here is going to flow into sort of this central stream, which would be the Little Tennessee River. Of course, the Tuckasegee River is part of this watershed. Please notice that this is a map of North Carolina and that there are about 17 separate watersheds that are going to be inside of North Carolina. Yesterday's video was looking at this one, the Cape Fear watershed, and it was looking at the forever chemicals that were dumped into it. But those watersheds can be broken down in several ways. So when you were doing your research, you may remember that the Tennessee River flowed into the Little Tennessee River flowed into the Tennessee River, and we can see here that the Tennessee River watershed includes parts of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky, and maybe no, it doesn't even really get into the Ohio. But so I want you to think of this. This is the high place, and all the water that is inside of this area is flowing into the Tennessee River, into the Tennessee River watershed. Okay, so remember, just another drainage basin. And of course, when we were doing the activity, I hope most of you were able to figure out that the water in the Tuckasegee is headed to the Gulf of Mexico, and the last river that it becomes part of is the Mississippi River. And so the Mississippi River is a major drainage basin or watershed for the United States. Most of the water from the center of the United States is going to head down the Mississippi. So when we looked at in the last slide, when we looked at the Tennessee River watershed, we said that all of these states in here drain some water into that Tennessee River watershed. But if we look at the Mississippi River watershed, so this is even bigger. So the Tennessee River watershed is part of this Mississippi River watershed. And look at all the states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, all the way up to Montana and the Dakotas, Colorado, part of Texas. So we can see that the Mississippi River is an enormous watershed. So watersheds can be as small as, just Greens Creek, which is a very small stream that's near where I live, or they can be as large as something that's going to drain the water from the land that's going to drain the water from most of an entire continent. All right, guys, I think that's going to conclude it for today. I hope you have a great day.